Welcome to another Phaladipika. And I thought of a slogan for our Phaladipika. For those who like the vegetables straight from the farm, we bring you Phaladipika. When you get your knowledge straight from the classics. So we are up to chapter 7, which is specifically about how to read charts for political leaders and kings. How to see, how to predict the career of people born in royal families or born into political power. So those are called Raja Yogas, although it's not the typical Raja Yoga that you think of. We're talking about the yogas. See, chapter 6 was about yogas in general. And now chapter 7 is about yogas that are specific to royalty. People who will become kings, who could become kings, who could easily become kings. So let's take a look. Let's see what's the first thing on the plate. We're up to the 20th text. And he says, Shukro jiva nirikshito vitanute bhupodbhavam bhupatim. Well, that means that you will become a bhupati, which means a king, if you have, Shukra, which is Venus, aspected by Jupiter, Jiva Nirikshita. If Jupiter Jiva is Nirikshita, aspecting or looking at Venus. Then that doesn't mean that you will become a king if you have Venus aspected by Jupiter if you're not born in royalty. Remember that. The context of all these yogas is for people in the royal family. But if a person in a royal family has Venus aspected by Jupiter, they become a king. Dvedyo mrigabham hayatanuyo mateba yuktam nirpam. If Jupiter is in the first house and not debilitated, the first house is not Capricorn, but Jupiter is in it, then a person born in a royal family becomes a king. Excuse me. Kendre janmapatir baladhikayuta kurya dharitrir patim. You'll also become a king if you're in a royal family if you're janmapati. Janmapati is your ascendant lord, first lord. If janmapati is kendre, in a kendra, in a central house, 1, 4, 7, or 10. And it's not weakened somehow, like baladika, if it has strength. So in other words, if it's not weak, so let's say, if you see some extenuating circumstance, like it's combust or it's debilitated or something like that, then that will mitigate this. But if it's strong in a kendra, first lord, then you become a king. Again, that if you're in a royal family. So you may say, let's finish this and then I'll do the you may say stuff. Drishte vakpatina budhe Drishte vakpatina budhe dadati pritvishash chatachchasanam. If Mercury is like that and aspected by Jupiter, the person instead becomes a political advisor. So let me just make this note that I just wanted to make, which was, this is a chapter about how to interpret charts for royalty. I'm not royalty, so let's skip this chapter. No, that's pretty dumb. You don't have to. If you learn how to sew a scarf, like if you know how to knit a scarf, you may say, but I didn't want to knit a scarf. Let's say you want to knit mittens, right? You want to make mittens. But your grandma's going to teach you how to knit a scarf. She's making a scarf and she's going to teach you how to knit a scarf. And you say, no, I want to learn how to knit mittens. That would be pretty stupid. You would be missing an opportunity to learn how to knit mittens, even though she's going to teach you how to knit a scarf, because it's the same stuff involved. in making a scarf than it is in mittens. It's just a very slight difference, right? So even though you may not be reading charts for the president of Paraguay or a president, or the minister of defense for Cuba or something, you, by knowing how the readings of those charts would be done, you know how to read charts for anybody. You just slightly scale it different. So, for example, if Venus is aspected by Jupiter, you don't have to care whether or not the person is a king. What you learn from this verse is if Venus is aspected by Jupiter, that's very prosperous. That's very good. The benefics are aspecting each other, or one benefic is aspecting another. And Jupiter is increasing the prosperity of Venus because Jupiter is an increaser by its aspect. Okay? So also Jupiter in the first house makes a king if you're born in royalty. Well, I'm not born in royalty, so it's totally irrelevant. No, it's completely relevant. If you're born in a potter's family and you have Jupiter in the first house, not debilitated, you'll be an excellent potter. Jupiter in the first house makes success. If the first lord is very strong in a Kendra, it doesn't matter if you're royalty or not. That's a very good principle. If the first lord is in a Kendra or a Kona, or a trine, then it indicates that the first house is strong and influential. The person has influence over and they have control over their own destiny. They have control over their own life, and they make their own decisions. And then the last part here is if Mercury is like that. So the wording is a bit vague. Drishte Vakpatina Buddhe. This part is clear. Buddha is Mercury, and if it has Vakpati, which is Jupiter, if it has Vakpatina, is Drishta. If Jupiter is aspecting Mercury, that part's clear. And then the rest is also clear too. Dadati Pritivishas Tachasanam. It's hard for me to fully accept this way of presenting it, but the word tat may be pointing back. So if Mercury is like that, so it might mean if Mercury is in a Kendra. Though the reason why I say it's hard for me to really believe that, I might change this translation. Because it seems like he's just saying you will Prativishas Chasanam means you're going to be the advisor of kings. Or you will be the discipliner of kings. So kings will follow your orders. So Tat might just mean the king. And after all, Venus aspected by Jupiter was one of the things we said before. So how about just Mercury aspected by Jupiter? It doesn't seem like it's too easy. So anyway, the concept here is Mercury is the ambassador type, right? The ambassador. So if Mercury is aspected by Jupiter, you'll be smart. If you are in a political family or a royal family, then your smartness will be applied to politics. So he's saying if you have a royalty and they have Mercury aspected by Jupiter, then they probably will be too smart to just be a king. They'll probably wind up being more like a Brahmana, a person who advises the king. Not just advises, but actually like commands the king, tells the king what to do, informs the king. All right, interesting stuff. There's actually 4 principles in that. Oh my God, what's that? So I hope you found that interesting. Thank you, Bardo. And let's see what some of these things are. Do conjunctions count as aspects? They don't. They don't count as aspects, but generally they do the same thing. But the problem with conjunctions is, do you have any online friends? If you have any online friends, you'll know the difference between an online friend and a friend and like a roommate. The difference is both of them influence you. You can argue that the roommate influences you more than the online friend. However, the roommate is much, much, much more annoying than the online friend because the online friend has distance. So it's the same dynamic going on, and the difference between an aspect and a conjunction. When planets conjoin, they influence each other, but they also step on each other's toes and get in the way of each other. When they aspect each other, they're just influencing each other and they're not bothering each other either. So aspects tend to be less problematic than conjunctions. That's why when you see negative yogas described, they're more about conjunctions. And positive yogas are more about aspects. Although you see negative yogas if such and such is aspected by Mars and Saturn, etc. But it's even worse if it's conjoined. So let me just put it to you this way. The basic principle is benefic things can be achieved by conjunction or aspect, but aspect is better. And malefic things or difficult things can be achieved by aspect or conjunction, but conjunction is more effective. Okay. Are planets in the third house considered bad? No. Depends on what the planets are. Exactly. Okay. So that was a simple one. 4 quick, easy things. Let's see the next one. This next one is interesting, and I want to go on a little bit of a tangent with this next one. Eko pyuchak chetrago mitradishta. Kuryad pupam mitrayogat panadam. Wait, let me get this right. Some say surye. Eko pyucha chetrago mitradishta. Kuryad bhupam mitrayogad panadyam. Swangshe surye swarkshagash chandramas. Chede shadis anshasvanagam vidhate. Not a very commonly seen meter. A king is indicated if even one exalted planet is aspected by a friend that is conjoined a friend. A very wealthy king is indicated if the sun is in its own navamsha while the moon is domicile. Well, I believe this is 2 separate yogas because every time he gives the effect, it kind of indicates one yoga. So the first yoga is Eka Api. Ucha Chetraga Mitradishta. So if you have some planet that is Ucha Chetraga, which means the planet has gone into its exaltation sign, then that's good. Duh, right? This is basic stuff. It's better to have planets exalted than debilitated. If you have an exalted planet, it's good. And now it says Eko Api, even if you only have one, then that is very good if Mitra Trishta, it is seen by its friend, or it's aspected by its friend. Kuryad Bhupam, it makes you a king. Mitra Yogad Bhanadyam, especially if the friend is also influenced or conjoined by its own friend. Here's a conjunction, Yogat. So, for example, here's an example. If you have Saturn in Libra, then you've met this first principle of ekopi uch chetrago. There's one planet that's exalted. Now, if Saturn is in Libra, and let's put Venus, Saturn's two friends are Venus and Mercury. So let's put Venus in Aries. So it can oppose Saturn and see it. Now you have Eko Pyucha Chetrago Mitra Drishta. Saturn is exalted and seen by its friend. And if you put Mercury also in Aries, then Venus and Mercury are two friends that are together and they're both aspecting Saturn. Then he says, this will make a person a king. This will make a royal child a king. And if you're not a royal child, this is a good thing to have in a chart. This will make you, this is a blessing in a chart. To have a planet that's exalted and aspected by a friend. So the basic takeaway is, oh look, it's one thing to be aspected by a benefic or a malefic, but it's also a consideration whether the planet that's aspecting you is a friend of you or not. So, for example, Venus being aspected by Saturn, it's being aspected by a malefic, but Venus and Mercury, it's a good thing to be friends with Saturn, because then the influence from Saturn isn't as difficult, because it's also your friend, so it's also got a positive side to it. Similarly, for the other group of planets, Jupiter, Sun, Moon, if they get aspected by Mars, it's an aspect from a malefic, but it's a friendly malefic. But really, the difficult things happen if you get Venus or Mercury aspected by Mars, or if you get Jupiter or Sun or Moon aspected by Saturn. Then it's an enemy malefic. What's this lemon dancing now? Thank you, Laura. Debilitated friend is still a friend, I guess, but not as good. Okay, so that's the first one. Eko pi ucha chetrago mitra rishta kuryad bhupa mitra yogad banadyam. Then the second thing is a very wealthy king is indicated if the sun is in its own navamsha while the moon is damasal. So the sun needs to be in Leo navamsha. We don't particularly care. He hasn't mentioned which Leo navamsha. He doesn't mind if it's in Aries or Sagittarius or anywhere. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Let's take a look at something. Let's take a look at all the Leo navamshas. Give me a second. I'm curious about something. Let me share this screen with you. Chart. Oh, that's big. Actually, one second. How's this? That's kind of lovely. Oh my God. Oh, now it's on the wrong one. That's bad. Could be revealing personal information. Let me change this up. There we go. But that was kind of interesting, wasn't it? All right, so this is what I wanted to do. The sun is in the Leo navamsha. I'm just curious to see where are all the Leo navamshas. So let's start with Aries. Here's the navamshas of Aries, starting with Aries. So the fifth navamsha in the zodiac is Leo. And then the next one is in Taurus. And then the next one, go away. And then the next one The Gemini doesn't have one. Then there's one in Cancer, and then there's going to be one in Leo, right in the middle of Leo, and then probably Virgo's not going to have. Oh, Virgo does have one. Aha, a Libra. This was my suspicion. Libra does not have a Leo Navamsha. That's really interesting. Libra does not have a Leo Navamsha. So why is that interesting? Because the planet which is debilitated in that sign doesn't have its own Navamsha in that sign. Let's check and see if that's true for any other planets. Let's look. See, it's not true for everybody. Oh well. I almost thought I made a monumental discovery of the century. But Scorpio does have a Cancer Navamsha. Let's just see which ones. Let's see the rest of the ones that Libra is missing. Finish the thought. So Leo is in Scorpio. Leo is in Sagittarius. Leo is in Capricorn, but not in Aquarius. Leo is in Pisces. It is fairly interesting. All right, so thank you for following me on that little roller coaster tangent. I just wanted to check to see where the Leos are. If the sun is in a Leo Navamsha, that's what he says. Swamshe Surye. Swamshe Surye means the sun is in his own Navamsha. So that can happen anywhere, almost anywhere in the zodiac except Aquarius and Libra. So you could put the sun, let's say, in Leo, right in the middle of Leo. There's a Leo Navamsha. And besides the sun being in its own Navamsha, the moon needs to be someplace particular. The moon needs to be domicile. Svarkshaga. Sa'arksha means domicile in its own sign. Svarkshaga Chandrama, the moon. Then you get a king who has a lot of horses and wealth. So the sun and the moon are the two royal planets. And if they're domicile, and for some reason he likes the sun to be domicile in the Amsha or Navamsha and the moon to be domicile in the main chart. Don't know why that's that way, but that's the way he has it. What I think is interesting about that is it's significant to be domicile in the Navamsha. Alf asks, we talk about Navamshas a bit. What about Surya chart? Is it a flip of the Lagna and Chandra chart? Is that a good thing? It's just a very simple thing. What is the ascendant? And how is the ascendant different from the Lagna? A Lagna is a term which is in Indian astrology that is not in common English use in astrology. I don't know if it's in Greek astrological language, but I know it's not in English, or at least I'm not aware of it in English. There is a difference between ascendant and Lagna. Lagna means anchor. Lagna means the thing which you get linked to. Lug around. In English, we say lug around. You lug something around. So it's like something you're pulling around. It's like an anchor you're carrying. Lagna is the thing which gives the weight and the anchor to something else. The ascendant in Sanskrit is not called the Lagna. It's called the Udaya, which means ascendant. Udaya means to come up and rise up. The thing that we commonly just call the Lagna is actually, the full term for it is the Udaya Lagna. You don't have to say Udaya Lagna. If you just say Lagna without any adjective, then we assume that you mean Udaya Lagna. But if there's other kind of Lagnas, like Chandra Lagna, Surya Lagna, Arudha Lagna, there's so many other ones. So if you now think, what is it about? What do you mean anchor? It means, what are you going to focus the chart on? What is everything else relative to? That's the lagna. You have all these positions. This planet is at X degree. This other planet is at Y degree. Relative to what? The thing relative to what is the purpose of the concept of lagna, the anchoring point. Usually, the most common, the most useful, the most prevalent anchor point is the udaya, the ascendant. But other things can be used as the lagna. For example, anytime you do bhavat, bhavam, anytime where you could make the second house the lagna. You could make the third house the lagna. And you could say that the third lord is in the 8th house from the 3rd house. Or you know what I mean? The third lord is in the 6th house from the 3rd house. You can do stuff like that. There's techniques like that. There's theories, there's theories or systems of interpretation that you can do things like that. You can make another planet a lagna. You can make Jupiter the lagna. So you can see the positions of things relative to Jupiter. You could make any planet the lagna. The 3 most common or important lagnas are the three most common or important lagnas are, first of all, the Udaya Lagna, which is the ascendant, the Chandra Lagna, which is the moon, and the Surya Lagna, which is the sun. So, instead of taking the ascendant as the first, look at the video I just did on Jupiter and Pisces. Amber Heard was one of the people who has Jupiter and Pisces, but nobody has a clue to what her birth time is. So, what I did was I just used Chandra Lagna. It's a secondary lagna. So then the moon is by definition the first house. The moon is the definer of the first house, so it will always be in the first house. So with Surya Lagna, the sun will always be in the first house because it's the definer of the first house. And the purpose of that is just, instead of seeing things in relationship to the physicality, which is the ascendant, then if you make everything relative to the moon, then you'll see things relative to the next most important thing, which is not the physical reality, but the person's internal reality. And if you make it relevant to the sun, then it's the third thing, which is important. It's not just the internal reality, but it's like the way that their ego or identity is assembled. But these charts are useful, to rotate a chart to the moon and make the moon the focal point. It's useful, and to make the sun the focal point is useful. Hell, to make anything a focal point is useful. But don't forget your priorities, or don't get lost in the woods. When you go off the path, don't get lost in the woods. Keep track of where the path is and come back to it. So remember, the ascendant is the primary thing. The moon is giving you more information. The moon's lagna is giving you more information for that same person that you're mostly getting information about from the ascendant. Does that make sense? So don't run wild with a subchart or like an Amsha chart or a alternative lagna. Don't run wild and forget about the main lagna. All these other lagnas are giving you information in the context of the main one. Hopefully that is clear. I mean, if you have a full moon, then your Surya Lagna is going to be the opposite houses than your Chandra Lagna. If you have moon in 7th, then your Chandra Lagna is going to have opposite houses. God, so many donations today. Thank you again, Laura. You know what I'm saying? If you have moon and sun in the first house, then all 3 charts are going to be identical. By the way, what's his name? Parashar Muni, he gives a lot of stress to this, to the importance of the sun and moon lagna, and he has a really useful technique for making sure that you keep all 3 in context. So he has this system called the Sudarshan Chakra. Yeah, Micah, if you don't have a birth time, then the Chandra Lagna is the best Lagna that you could use. Anyway, let me tell you about this thing from Parashar. He has a very interesting strategy or approach to using the 2 Lagnas. He sticks all 3 of them on a wheel, so he makes a tri-wheel. You know, bi-wheels, tri-wheels. He makes a tri-wheel, so he'll take the main chart and make it a wheel and make it the inner wheel, and then he'll take the same chart, rotate it to the moon and put it as a wheel on the outside of that one, and take the same chart and rotate it to the sun and put it as a 3rd wheel rotated. And then he says, now you could see them all at once, and you can prioritize the inner one over the outer ones, over the outermost one, but you can still see these are all 3. You see the first house from 3 dimensions, and you see the second house from 3 dimensions, and third. And he calls that Sudarshan Chakra, which is an allusion to the legendary weapon of Vishnu, but it means the wheel, which gives you the clear vision. Sudarshan Chakra. All right, let us go now. What I thought here that was kind of a throwback was where he says Ekopi, even one exalted planet. A king is indicated if even one exalted planet is aspect by a friend that is conjoined to a friend. This, I found this interesting. Now, I should probably just investigate these last 2 words a little more. Vanadium. Want to do that together? I'm going to whip out this dictionary and see what kind of possibilities are there. Generally, it means a river. Let's see if it's Adya. Don't have any. Adhyartha, above word. Let me try one more thing. I'll tell you why in a second. Why I'm looking this up. See, the translators, 1 or 2 other translators that I look at, they bring the concept of the exaltation degree into this translation. So you may have, if you read translations of Phaladipika, you may be wondering about that. But they'll say something like, if you have one planet at the exaltation degree, so for example, like if you have the moon at 3 degrees of Taurus, I forget some of the other ones. 28 for Mars. If you have Mars at 28 degrees of Capricorn, even one of those, aspected by a friend who's by a friend who's with a friend. But I don't have any idea where they're getting that from. Maybe there's some obscure reading. Maybe I haven't parsed the Sanskrit at the end of this second line correctly, or maybe there's some obscure meaning that I'm not aware of. But I don't see it. So what I think happens with the translator is what happened to me. Immediately when I heard Akopi, I thought, didn't he say this already? Does that happen to you too? When he says even one, doesn't that sound familiar? Like he talked about this already. And so, in the effort to differentiate it from something that he's already said, they may have looked for a way to bring in the concept of exaltation degree. I don't know. My verdict is out about this. But anyway, I want to follow you. Didn't he say this before? I want to follow up on that. Do you recall that he said this before? Let's find it. Let's go back to the first text. The first thing that he said in the chapter is 3 or more planets exalted or domicile while in a Kendra. The person should be a celebrated king. If there are 5, it will be true if they're not from the ruling class. Yeah. And he starts, even one planet shining brightly during retrogression. Yadi ekopi virajit angshanikara sustango vakritko. Even one planet shining brightly during regression is in a good house should make a person be a king, even if it's debilitated. Remember that stuff? So this is a throwback to that. We're saying some things are so powerful, some situations are so powerful that even if that's the only thing in the chart, that's enough. Most things are not like that. Most things are a bit wishy-washy in what they're indicating. So you need to have several of those indications to make something a strong effect. But some things are very strong on their own. For example, even one planet shining brightly during retrogression in a good house. Whereas just to have a planet exalted or domicile, you need 3 of them. If you're in a royal family, and if you're not in a royal family, you better have 5. If you want to become a king. So that was the throwback. That was the previous reference of that kind of enumeration of how many things it takes. So I believe that this is the best understanding of the statement. A king is indicated if even one exalted planet is aspected by a friend that is conjoined to friend. He hasn't said it before. This is a new yoga. And the important thing here that makes it different is the aspect from friends, the influence from friends. Okay, any question about that? I don't know, sometimes my tangents are indecipherable, or maybe it was clear. Good, Red. I live in the aroma of watermelon. I like that. All right. Let's go on to the 22nd text. Mine Purna Jyotishi. That was funny, actually, when I said the word Jyotishi. I was like, what? He's talking about an astrologer now? No, but Jyotishi means somebody who has light. Astrology is called Jyotisha because it deals with lights, because it deals with the lights in the sky. And so therefore another meaning of Jyotisha is somebody who deals with astrology. But a very literal meaning of Jyotishi is something that shines. And Purna Jyotishi means something that's fully shining. And if you're talking about Chandra, as he's talking about here, that means the full moon. Mina is Pisces. Mine means in Pisces. Mine Purna Jyotishi Mitra Graha Drishte Chandre. So if the moon is in Pisces, when it's full and aspected by a friend. So he's pulling together. I kind of like the way he organized this chapter. He's pulling together some of the previous components that he mentioned. Like previously he had this component of whether or not the moon is full. If the moon is full, that's important. It's more forceful. It's more beneficial when it's full. And then he also now previously talked about how the influence from a friend is important. So now he's saying, bring both of those together. Make the moon full and have it get influenced by a friend and put it in Pisces. What's so special about Pisces? Moon likes water signs. That was a previous thing that he mentioned also. Rashmi Jala. If the water signs for the moon are very good. And it's Jupiter's water sign. So it's the best one. It's one of the best ones. I mean, I guess Cancer is better domicile. Put the moon in Pisces while it's full and aspected by a friend. And then you have Lokananda Karasyan Nripamukya. You have the kind of person that makes people very, very happy. They're going to be very attractive, really put it that way. And the reason is that their features will be very full. Very big eyes, very full features. The body is big. Because that's the effect of getting moon in Pisces. So they become like very beautiful. Mukhya means face, and it also means the best. So he's in a non-royalty person. You put the moon in Pisces and you have it aspected while it's full, my God. And you have it aspected by friends. The person is going to be gorgeous. So therefore they'll be very popular. If it's in a royal family, that kind of popularity lends to them becoming king. And then Purna Jyoti Swochagatascha Tuinangshus Chaghadikam Sanjana Shastam Jagadisham. A charitable and praised king, a charitable and praised king is indicated if the full moon is exalted. So this is to have the moon, to have a planet exalted is one thing, to have it bright is another thing. Now, that's why it's called a yoga. Put the two things together. Have it exalted and bright. It's the same thing as we had before. To have a planet in the Kendra is one thing. To have a planet in good dignity is another thing. Have it in a Kendra in good dignity. Now you have a yoga. It's called Mahapurusha Yoga. So now today, right now, it's having a planet exalted is one thing. Having a planet bright is another thing. Have them at the same time. You got a yoga. Moon's brightness is the most obvious. Have the moon in Taurus while the sun is in Scorpio. More or less. It could possibly be out of Scorpio by a little bit and still have the moon basically be full. Any questions about that? What the Pisces moon is full in the 12th, this was actually one of the yogas that he mentioned before. You want me to find it? I'll find it. Isn't it this one? Maybe it's here. This one. King with a huge military. Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn are in Pisces. Full moon is exalted. It's not. This isn't moon in Pisces 12th, but this is an example of putting certain things in the 12th house to get a certain effect. Putting things in good condition in the 12th house gets them out of the way, but not in a bad way. And so your specific question is, what if the full moon is in Taurus in the 12th house? It will be a different effect than if it's in the 1st or the 10th or something. But it still has this sense of the full moon being exalted and is making a charitable and praise king. In fact, he's saying Tyaga Adikam means charitable. The 12th house is the perfect house for charity. So it would probably be even more. More of the type of king who sacrifices for sacrifices for the kingdom, sacrifices for the people. Thank you, Red. Yeah, the donations are off the hook. Is exalted moon that's 8 houses away from the sun considered full? Depends mostly on the angle, but it's pretty darn bright. The closer that it is to 180, the more close that it is to exactly full. All right, we got one more. Chandre Adhimitrang Shagate Sudrishte Shukrena Lakshmi Sahito Nripasya Tatastite Vasava Mantri Drishte Purnam Dharitram Paripalayatsa. A very wealthy king is indicated by the moon aspected by Venus, while in the Navamsha of a very dear friend. If also aspected by Jupiter, they come to rule the entire world. So Chandre, the moon, Adimitrang Shagate. It's in the Amsha, which just like lagna means the Navamsha. Just like lagna means Udaya lagna, Amsha means Navamsha, unless otherwise specified. Adimitra. So Mitra means friend and Adimitra means best friend. As you probably remember, you get 2 grades of friends and 2 grades of enemies as a result of mixing Naimittika and Nysargika friendships. As a result of mixing the inherent friendships with their situational modifier. For example, remember we talked about conjunctions, one the problematic nature of conjunctions, things are too close together. So for example, the Sun and Jupiter are friends. But if Jupiter is in the same sign as the Sun, the friendship decreases. So it becomes neutral. But if Jupiter is in the next 3 signs, or the previous 3 signs from the Sun, then the friendship improves because they're close but not too close. So then the relationship between Jupiter and the Sun is Adhimitra. Not just Mitra, but Adhimitra. Very friendly. So you want to find the moon in an Amsha sign that belongs to a natural friend who is in a good condition. So let's say you have the moon in Capricorn. Are you going to be able to get this yoga? No. Because the best you can get out of that is just regular friendship. But if you put the moon in Jupiter's sign, like the moon in Pisces Navamsha, then can you get this? Yes, maybe. You have to look at the main chart now and see how far Jupiter is from the moon. If it's 3 signs after the moon or 3 signs before the moon, you've got it. Because now they become best friends. But if it's in the other 6 houses, then you don't have it because they lost their friendship. They didn't become enemies, but they lost their friendship. So that's what it means. So for example, the moon in Pisces Navamsha, while in Pisces and while Jupiter is in Sagittarius. Right? Yes. You'll get the moon being in a best friend's Amsha. And on top of that, the moon must be aspected by Venus. So the moon in Pisces, well, Venus is in Virgo. And Jupiter is in Sagittarius. And the moon is in the end of Pisces, so it gets the Pisces Navamsha. So then you get a very wealthy king. Because you're talking about the moon being very nice and is being aspected by Venus. So you're getting two fertile, abundant indicators cooperating in a positive way. You're going to get wealth, tons of wealth. If you're not a king, you're a business person, you're just going to be a wealthy business person. If also aspected by Jupiter, that moon is also aspected by Jupiter, then forget about it. They take over everything. Purnam Dharitram Palayatsa, they take over the whole world. Okay, that's everything for today. Any last questions? I have concluded that if I was born one day earlier, Com says, I would be a king right now. One day after an eclipse. Hey, did you see my question about Aries moon? I stepped away. I didn't see it. Ronaldo says, oh, I wanted to ask about Krishna's chart and counting good amshas because his Venus, Saturn, Raja Yoga, they are close. We don't know the degrees. Nobody knows the degrees of Krishna's chart. It's not a historical chart. You can't give a birth time to Krishna's chart because it just doesn't happen. I mean, you know, it has to be, we're talking about the Krishna that was in the Kurukshetra war era. So you have to find an astrological date that's roughly 5,000 years ago. But there's no date that produces the combination of planets that he's said to have had in that area. In fact, I've done searches years ago. I did searches for thousands of years, and you don't see it happen. So you don't know the degrees. What we can assume with confidence is that the moon was literally rising, because that's the description. So it's not just that the moon is somewhere in the first house, but that the moon was literally rising. It's problematic anyway. It's more like a allegorical chart than a literal chart. So I wouldn't really actually use it. Well, anyway, what's the question? So he's saying since Venus and Saturn are together. So if you have Venus in Libra and Saturn in Libra, thanks, Elf. If you have Venus in Libra and Saturn in Libra, then what about the friendship between them? Right, the friendship between Saturn and Venus has become neutral because they're in the same house. They're not enemies. They're just not friendly anymore. They're just tolerating each other. But if you have Saturn and Venus in Libra, you have them both in very good dignity. So don't expect them to be negative neutral. They're positive neutral. Thank you, Heidi. All right, guys. Oh my God, lunar eclipse was in Vic's 11th house. That's why I'm getting all this money right now. Says Heidi Campbell of Divine, what is it? Divine Time Astrology. All right, guys. Thank you very much for the company and for all the support. And I'll see you again in 2 days for Bhagavatam, etc.